first thing I was basically saying is that basically we want to make sure that we're not disagreeing when there's no need to be disagreeing, and that the way to bond is actually when we disagree in order to validate our worth and our existence. Like essentially, we're being questioned, or there's a disagreement, and we are feeling questioned. And in order to show that we're either not wrong, the reason we want to show we are not wrong, or there was something else by explaining why we are doing what we're doing, really we're just trying to say, hey, we're not really bad, we're good. But ironically, doing that creates us more a contention point. Actually, if there's nothing to disagree on, but we find that we're actually in the wrong, or the other person was right about something that makes us feel really vulnerable, by actually reaching into vulnerable, then being able to say, yeah, actually you're right about that, or agreeing with the person allows us a really deeper bond, because bond and intimacy is created through vulnerability, where we connect with something that's really true. And so that's the first part, actually just remembering, go towards vulnerability, because that's actually really what we're looking for. And then don't disagree unless it's necessary. And as strategies for that, number 2 is actually when you're saying things that you're disagreeing, actually just listen to yourself to see whether you're actually really proving the other person's point. Because oftentimes as we defend ourselves, if we really listen to what we're saying, we oftentimes realize, oh, actually, you know what? This is exactly what the other person said, at least in part. Maybe it's not correct on the whole, but at least in part. And agree with what you can. So when you notice you're doing that, stop there and say, you know, I do have to agree with you that this part is actually accurate, but the portion I wanted to explain was this part. But you know, we want to be cautious when you do that, because it might be that we're being petty because we're feeling defensive. And so if that's actually the case, then we want to back off altogether and say, you know what? Now that I'm talking, I'm realizing actually you're right. And then that's a great recovery. And so that's number 2, just listen to yourself when you're disagreeing, because it oftentimes saves us so much relationship. And then number 3, agree until you get the feeling that you shouldn't have agreed. Oftentimes, we vacillate between 2 things. We disagree unnecessarily, or we agree when we really shouldn't have agreed. And typically that comes at the heels of a disagreement. You've disagreed, and you can tell the relationship isn't quite there, so now you want to please the person, and then you agree to something really when you shouldn't, and you compromise yourself. And it's a terrible, terrible cycle between pleasing and then disagreeing when you shouldn't. And you never get to bond, because when you're agreeing when you shouldn't, you can't bond, because you feel like you're sacrificing yourself. And then when you disagree, of course, when you shouldn't, you don't bond. Actually, I do need to say this, that when you're disagreeing, when you should, you actually bond over that, because it's the truth. And that's a very important thing. So I'm not saying that a person shouldn't disagree. What I'm saying more deeply is that we need to make sure that we're actually in the truth, as in we need to be honest about what's really going on. And so oftentimes we are disagreeing when we shouldn't be. So having said that, agree, let your knee-jerk reaction to be agreeing, because if you agree, then when you're relaxed, because you're not having to worry about displeasing the person. And then you agree, and then you say something, and then you can feel, oh, that wasn't true. And you can say, oh, hang on a second, you know what? You say basically, yes. Oh, hang on a second, hey, no, that was actually a no. And it's a good default, because when you're being positive, it's more easier to feel when actually something wasn't true. So hopefully it was helpful.